Good morning. I call to order the Delaware County Board of Elections Board meeting for October 24th, 2023. Please stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a short agenda today. I don't even know if we need to consider it for that long, Mr. Allen, but we start with public comment. I don't believe there's anybody who would like to make public comment. And so with that, I'm going to just the agenda itself is the Director of Elections quick report. We need to take an action item for the formal delegation of authority for processing mail and absentee ballots. And then we will talk about the next meeting date. So Mr. Allen.
Very briefly, all of the drop boxes are open. All the cameras are operational. We have, for the first time, all 39 or all of the available Dropbox cameras functional. We've had to shut down a few in the past because the cameras had issues. We're over 13,000, approaching 14,000 returned vote by mail ballots. We've mailed out approximately 40,000 at this point. And we're doing well in terms of poll workers. We're down to 14 or 15 out of the 428 precincts where we currently lack a judge of election, where we may be approaching another judge of election at the same site to be able to handle both precincts, or approaching someone to find a replacement. So we're we're doing reasonably well.
Great. All right, then would you like to present the action item that we have on the agenda, please?
Oh, I forgot to
Oh,
mention, we may have one polling place change item that came to our attention last evening, call from a judge of election. There's a firehouse that we use for one of our precincts in Marcus Hook where there may be road construction that might interfere with the access to the building. So we're checking into that. If we do have to make that change, we will be mailing cards to all of the voters in that affected precinct to alert them to the polling place change.
Okay, and then putting, I assume, signs up, obviously, so as required, so that they will know where to go. And Mr. Parks, just to be clear, if that decision has to be made, it's going to be close to the election. We won't have a board meeting. Can you just explain how that will be handled?
There are provisions in the code for dealing with last minute emergency polling place changes. So to the extent that becomes necessary, I will circulate a communication to Mr. Allen and the board members, just explaining the details of the code sections on that.
Okay, and then our practice has been to review them afterwards.
That has been the practice, and it's understood that we will follow the regulations of the code with respect to the emergency changes.
Okay, so Mr. Allen, if that does happen, I think then the next board agenda meeting agenda would need to have that included as a ratification. Great. All right. And then the reason we're here today, the main reason we're here today, is the formal delegation of authority. Mr. Allen, would you please discuss the authority that your office needs to carry out the election duties, obviously under the supervision of the board?
Per the solicitor, we need the board to consider delegating authority for the processing and the decision-making processes that are involved with reviewing the returned vote by mail and absentee ballot envelopes, whether it's checking the signatures or the dates and determining whether the signatures or the dates are sufficient, whether our cure processes are proper, and how we're going to administer the notice and cure in terms of getting an email, a phone call, or a letter to the voter whose envelope appears to be failing to meet the standards set by Pennsylvania statute. So with that, I would request that there be a motion to delegate the authority for decision-making and processing of mail and absentee ballots to the director and the staff.
And let me also just add to that, the assessment of provisional ballot, the initial assessment of provisional ballots, that's ultimately done by the board in the provisional ballot hearing, but Our practice is to have the staff of the voter registration office make the initial assessment. It's not probably technically necessary for a vote, but just so everybody understands, that is also being done in initial phase by the staff before the matters come to this board for a formal vote at the provisional ballot hearing.
And to that point, right, this whole thing that we're talking about sounds special, but it's normal process. I mean, that Mr. McLean, Mr. Alberts and I cannot do all of the work that your incredibly large and wonderful team does during election day. So this is something that we do every time we have an election, is delegate this authority for the day-to-day sort of necessary operations to run the election. So it may sound special, but it's what you've witnessed, everybody who's watched our election processing before. And of course, the board members are often present and certainly accessible and supervising the election is our duty. So Mr. Alberts, do you have any questions?
I would just add that that's entirely correct, but that when matters of sort of greater moment come to the director's attention, he's always been quick to, give a phone call to the board members, just check in with us to make sure that, before he makes a particularly impactful decision, that he is, understanding our intentions and wishes. So it's very important for him to have that flexibility for day-to-day management, and I do appreciate him keeping us informed and consulting with us, short of calling a formal meeting and having everyone, disrupt their schedule. So I do appreciate that.
Absolutely. So Mr. Alberts, do we have a motion?
I would move to formally delegate authority as described.
I would second that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. That motion passes. All right. Now, Mr. Allen, do you have any, obviously with being as close to the election as we are, we've talked about having an emergency polling place change with absent a meeting, but how do you anticipate, if you could just, maybe it's a guess, but you anticipate the meeting schedule after, during the election and after the election?
Well, the board members do meet at the processing center on election day, November 7th. And they informally, but nonetheless, to oversee the pre-canvassing and canvassing of the ballots on election day, as well as the reporting of the initial counts. After that, the return board will meet starting the Friday after election day. And then we would need, and at the same time, we will be reviewing, as Mr. Parks noted, the provisional ballots in voter registration. We would need to have a meeting on November 14th to review what we hope to have all of the recommendations on provisional ballots, as well as any objections or questions related to the provisional ballots. And then following that, that also would afford us to have the board sign off on what may be the unofficial count. We may do that outside of the board meeting by way of polling the board, and then I would assign, we may ask you to designate myself to affix the board signatures to that form so that it's submitted by 5 p.m., the close of business, the Tuesday following election day, to the Department of State. After that, we would, if we were able to process all of the ballots by the 16th of November, that would allow us to certify the election results as early as the 21st, the following Tuesday, or the 22nd, the Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving. The deadline for certifying the election would be the Monday after Thanksgiving, the 27th of November. My preference would be to certify as early as possible, given that there may be one or more close contests. And if those are going to proceed to a recount, we'd like to have that certification done sooner rather than later. Additionally, so far, it does not appear from either the vote by mail counts or the calls that we're getting or other measures that this is going to be a particularly high turnout election overall. There may be pockets of the county that do better than others, but overall, just about any measure that you have in terms of advertising, mailers, questions about campaign activity, all kinds of other things, requests for watcher certificates by every measure, including just the basics of how many candidates we have running. We have far fewer running than we did in 2021. There's just less competition this time around. So we'll see. We always hope for the best. We encourage our voters to take every election seriously, as there are serious decisions to be made on every single ballot. But hopefully we'll see stronger turnout, but so far there's been no indication that we will have that.
Well, I hope that we do. And as you could hear in Mr. Allen's comments, when he talks about best and good and pockets, what we want is strong voter turnout. However you vote, we want you to turn out. So please remember Election Day, and please go to the polls or mail in your ballot or drop it off in a drop box, which is now open, and that's been advertised. I saw that in the paper as well. So that's great. All right. Well, Mr. Allen, I would ask you just as a favor to put some of those tentative dates that you've indicated on our calendars as holds, perhaps, just because of the holiday. It would be helpful to make sure that we're all reserving that time with your goals in mind, that we would achieve this all before Thanksgiving. Mr. Alberts, do you have anything?
I have nothing further.
Mr. Parks? We're gonna close it up. All right, Mr.
Would Mr. McLean like to make a motion to adjourn?
McLean, would you like to say anything? Anything that you want to catch up on? We've delegated the authority.
Okay. I apologize. Well, I mean, there were a couple of issues that I wanted to bring up under new business. I know, I think Mr. Allen's gone, and I'm not sure whether anybody else, but concerning Haverford College, the registrations that are there. I catch my breath.
Yeah, all right.
And this is an issue that's been brought up to me by local leaders since I got on the board, and I've always said to them, well, you have to quantify it. There are a number of people registered at Haverford that, and probably is the same as other colleges that have long since left, but continue to vote there. So, and then part of, as I think we discussed in regard to a polling place, part of the college is not in Delaware County. It is in Montgomery County. In fact, the main address for it is in Montgomery County. And there are a number, hundreds of students that are registered at that Montgomery County address that vote here in Delaware County. And there are also, at least what was sent to me, there are 2 dorms where, according to the college's own records, let's say they, house 150 students and there are 175 students registered to vote there. So there's that category. And then there's, I think, category that objections have been raised that folks that plainly have just using the internet, you can identify that they no longer live in Haverford Township and they're no longer at the college. So I guess I wanted to, see what the process was now that, like I said, I think we have formally received, objections or challenges to those. How we handle that and what process we go through.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. McLean.
I doubt
As
you
you-
don't mean that, Mr. Allen.
No, no,
No, I'm just talking about this close to the election.
it is problematic for us to try to address this close to an election. I'll get to that. But this is an issue that I take very seriously because I want, consistency across all of our voter rolls. But you do need to take special measures, special steps with the various college campuses, whether it's Villanova, Swarthmore, Newman, or in this case, Haverford. And we did, as I've mentioned in a previous meeting, as a result, in response to some outreach that we received from Swarthmore College, we asked them if we could do something that hadn't been done in the past, and that was take the list of voters at one generic address, 500 College Avenue. And we presented them with the list of voters that we had, which are hundreds, and we wanted dorms assigned to each one that where there wasn't a dorm, a specific dormitory building or unit assigned to them. And they worked with us, and they also helped us identify all of the outdated records from students who were no longer there, so that we were able to initiate the steps that are required under federal law before before you start making someone inactive and then toward the process of removing them from the voter rolls. So with that in mind, I appreciate, but I wish it had come a lot earlier than 4:25 p.m. last Friday, and I did point that out. So I agree there are concerns with the Haverford addresses. The one in particular where there was a specific objection, I have already sent out an email to that voter saying, what's the score? Because if that voter is now attending an entirely different university and graduated from Haverford, and yet is getting a ballot from us for this election, that's problematic. I will say in this voter's defense that we researched it, that Friday afternoon, even though it was 4:25, 5 minutes before our closing time. We work more hours than we don't shut down at 4:30. The rest of the county may be for the most part vacating their offices at 4:30. We're not at this time of year.
I know it's not unusual at all
So-
that I get contact from you on Friday nights, I mean, for election bureau matters.
Well, sometimes it's about a Phillies game too. But in any event, this person filled out an annual form. So they applied for the year for March. So this may be a simple matter of filling out the form that under state law requires us to present that voter with send that voter a ballot, both for the May primary and the November election. So we haven't heard back from that voter, but we'll continue to pursue that. There was no phone number on the record, either in the registration but we're going to try to reach that voter nonetheless. That was the one specific instance where it was clearly problematic, at least based on the information that was presented to us. It may be that the person has a legal, valid claim of residency at Haverford, but based on the information that was presented to me, that appeared doubtful. Now, with the issue of which ones are in Montco, which ones are in Delco, that's going to require first finding all of the dorms where these individuals live. Because what I'm finding and it's not unique to Haverford, it's also, I've seen it at Villanova, your alma mater, where they use these common addresses that represent 5 dorm buildings that are in, entirely different precincts. And it's a problem. But it works for their mailing system, and it leads to miscounts in the census, and it leads to all kinds of issues. But we can look more closely at that. But and the reason I bring up this past Friday, 4:25 p.m., is that yesterday, Monday, the 23rd, was the deadline for us to update or receive any updates and process updates to registrations. Now, this won't stop us from trying to reach all these voters, trying to reach out to Haverford College and say, what are these? So that at least moving forward, we might be able to identify which dorm buildings and which dorm units these individuals actually occupy or don't occupy. But long-term, I've always said that ahead of the presidential, when we get the most participation in 2024, I'd like to work with a consortium, excuse me, of the university presidents and student engagement staff and vice presidents, so that we can try to have a game plan that works, especially ahead of the fall election in 2024. So, I mean, we'll do what we can with this list, but there also are limits on a federal election where you have to try to tackle any kind of voter removal system 90 days before election day, which puts you about, August 6th usually. So we'll definitely look into that, but we definitely want to hit the ground running well ahead of next August for the next presidential election. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do with that list right now in here, 14 days before.
No, and if I can, I appreciate that, and I agree. Like I said, this issue has been brought to me by local leaders, since I've been on the board, and I've always said to them, please, there's a process for challenges. If you've got something specific, then please do that. And they've finally done that. Unfortunately, it's only a couple weeks out from the election. I mean, I'll ask Mr. Park, maybe take a look at their section 1329 that relates to challenges.
Well, they still can file challenges to any who voted by mail up till the Friday before election day. They have to pay a fee of $5 cash per challenge, but I'll let.
Right. So there are a couple of things that, first of all, if people have not a mere suspicion, but a concrete basis to allege that somebody is committing an election law violation of any sort, they should let us know. And our practice is to refer those matters to the district attorney for investigation and possible prosecution. And there have been prosecutions on such matters by the DA in recent years. So
Can we pause on that, Mr. Parks, and just you explain why? I mean, this isn't just if someone's doing this, right? They shouldn't be voting for places that they aren't.
Correct.
So we have, a system here where we do have people who can face consequences for doing that.
that's exactly right.
Loosey-goosey college
No,
thing. So
there are firm rules, and these are matters that are, governed by the election code and the criminal code of Pennsylvania. And there are potentially criminal consequences for knowingly voting in an election in violation of those laws. So certainly if people have, again, a concrete position, not some vague suspicion, but a concrete allegation to raise, they should let us know, and that will be referred to the DA for prosecution, assuming we determine it's at least colorable. And I add that qualification because I would remind folks that everyone, including college students, has a right under the Pennsylvania election code to vote one last time at a polling place after they've moved. So in the case, it sounds like of what we're talking about, somebody may be moved in June, perhaps, when they graduated and are now at some other institution. Well, it kind of depends on where that institution is my recollection of that vote one last time rule. But if if any member of the public moves down the street to a new apartment in Upper Darby, it's not a crime for them to vote at their prior polling place one last time after they've moved. In order to cast that ballot, they have to fill out a form saying I've moved and going forward, my new address is type of thing. So there are, just because of the circumstance you're describing, or that sounds like is being described, doesn't necessarily mean there's any wrongdoing at all. And college students get the same rights as every other resident and registered voter to have all of the full rights and obligations under the code. So there's that to keep in mind. The other thing is we, as Jim mentioned, we are working actively to try to make sure that we keep these addresses up to date. But Jim mentioned there are federal laws, and it's the Help America Vote Act, sometimes or often referred to as HAVA, that you just can't pull people off of your voter rolls. It's actually a violation of federal law to do so without the proper process. So the process involves initiating a communication that if it doesn't come back as, hey, I still live here, then eventually the voter, I think there may be 2 rounds of that, the voter goes on inactive status, and it's over the course of like 6 congressional elections before, which is, 3 congressional elections, which is 6 years or whatever, before somebody can be totally removed from the voter roll. So it's just not as easy as, hey, now if the person re-registers elsewhere, then there's a different process. But this is just if the person stays silent when you can remove them for the voter rolls. Obviously, having accurate voter rolls is important, but they're always a lagging indicator because of these rules. What's more a point of concern is if somebody's voting and they no longer live there. And as I mentioned, that's not necessarily by itself a violation because of the one last time rule, but there are some parameters on that as well. So it's a little more complicated than I think people would like to have it be, but that's what the law requires. And the law is quite clear on this. And we as a board, I think and our staff for sure are meticulous about making sure that we dot every I and cross every T when it comes to this. And look, Crystal's been doing this for a very long time and she runs a very tight ship. And we've had people raise concerns, and every single time those concerns melt away when they see the efficiency with which she runs that operation and the accuracy with which that operation hews to the law.
And thank you, Manley, for mentioning apartment dwellers, because I was getting a little worried about the tone of the conversation. Made it sound like we were singling out college students. Certainly the boundary issue on the county line is a particular issue to Haverford College, and Villanova, I guess, as well. Cheney also, right, of course. And then, but the transients, I would say that there are apartment complexes in my neighborhood that experience turnover far greater than a college campus, where voters are still on the books after having maybe lived in an apartment for 3 months. A similar situation affects seniors in residential care facilities. You might be in a rehab facility for a few months, and then your condition changes. You get moved to a skilled nursing facility, in another municipality. You're still registered. It's very difficult for those people to change the registration and handle all their paperwork. So I think this is an issue that affects a lot of folks in the county. And if we're going to have a concerted effort to work with the universities and colleges, as you say, I just want to be careful that we're not singling out that population for special consideration when this is an issue that affects a great variety of voters.
Right, but I think the Swarthmore project went pretty well, right? As was reported. This has been discussed before, the idea that was a test project. If it went well, to your point about people who move and age, that's not the goal here, but understanding where the dorms are and making sure we have a solid assignment is something that.
Oh, the boundaries,
Yeah.
of course, that's,
And I agree. I mean, so this is the difference here, I think, though, is we have now received, challenges to these voters, under, 25 PACS section 1329. So there is a prescribed process here. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes the election code and the voter registration act are clear as mud. There's not a deadline as to when you can object. But there is a,
There's a deadline on the back end, there's not a deadline on the front end, I guess, is what he's not
right, so.
But do you have any concerns that they're not being carried out, the process correctly?
Well, I think we just got it, okay, but you have a situation where you have at least several hundred people who have been identified as having a Montgomery County address registered to vote in Delaware County. Now, it may very well be, and I suspect it is, that many of those people are in dorms that perhaps are in Delaware County. But again, the challenge process is used to resolve that. There's a contact made to the voter clarifies what it is. I'm not suggesting that we just vote here today to take all the students from Haverford College off of it, or even the ones that were there, but there is a process. And when objections are raised, we have to do something about it. I mean, if we do nothing about it, there's I'm trying to think of what races, maybe there's a commissioner's race, in Haverford Township where it's within a couple hundred votes or something like that. And this becomes an issue and the subject of objections. So I'm just asking, I would have preferred that those folks had filed objections in July, where I don't think anybody would have a problem dealing with it over a course of several months, but I think we need to at least sort of take a look at it. To now that we have received a challenge, for those voters.
But it sounds like we are, Mr. Allen. I'm not intimately familiar yet with these challenges that just came in, but it sounds like you're addressing them. You're working on them, and Mr. Parks advising on the issues around the timeliness and what can be accomplished.
the one specific challenge we're able to work on right away, the broad list of voters where they're registered at an address that may or may not be in Delco. That's a little harder to tackle because we can try to present that to the college and see if we can't identify which ones are living in dorms that are outside of Delaware County or inside Delaware County. We can also provide instructions to our judges of election in the affected precincts of which dorms, in the event that there's a challenge in person based on, which dorm do you live in? That's a possibility. I'd have to check with the solicitor whether we can do that. Provide the judges and say, well, these dorms are within the precinct, these dorms aren't. And if someone says I'm in, dorm Y, then you're not an eligible elector, and perhaps you cast a provisional ballot until we can examine the issue further after Election Day. That's another prescription we can provide.
I mean, this sounds targeted at college students who may have no cause of their own been unaware that they had an issue with this. And if it's designed to disenfranchise them, I certainly hope that as part of this work, we'll take every step to make sure that they're given the opportunity to vote, whether it's in how we handle the fact that they may have been misassigned by their college to the wrong county. That's a big issue, but I hope this isn't an effort to disenfranchise these voters.
Well, I mean, Madam Chair, with all due respect, it's something that is available under the code. I mean, the fact that they are at college is one thing. I mean, right now you have a situation where we have several hundred people with a Montgomery County address registered to vote in Delaware County.
Well, look, I mean, the thing is,
What is it?
the election code is neutral, right? The election code has
It doesn't sound
rules.
like we're not working.
Yeah, the election code has rules and the rules have to be followed. And if the rules are being used by partisans in a, in a way that we think is, we don't personally agree with, in our view, in our individual, the views of democracy, that's, I think that's, unfortunately, if a partisan actors are targeting college students, well, that's a political, that's a political issue, right? That's not, the board's job is to apply the rules as written. If the political parties want to trade volleys about whether one party or the other is disenfranchising young people or not trying to help them to vote, that's a matter to be hammered out among the political parties in the public town square, so to speak.
I don't
So
even know who made the challenge. What I'm saying is a last minute sandbag challenge here on a broad sweep. We will carry out our duties. I expect
Yeah.
that everybody here will carry out their duties to fully follow the process. But it sounds like a very generalized allegation against hundreds of voters who are college students. To Mr. Albert's point, it sounds like it's targeting college students. It was done, you said that you've been on this board for a couple of years and been raising this issue. It's done the very shortly before an election. So I just want to make sure that these people get their process. And I believe that our team, I think our solicitor and our director will make sure that they get proper process to determine whether or not they're eligible to vote in our elections.
And that's all I asked for, Madam Chair. I began this conversation by saying, I know this has been raised. What is it that we're going to do? And some of what I've heard is, well, there's other things they can do. We're not doing anything about it right now because we're too close to an election. And, we're afraid this is perhaps targeted at certain individuals. So we're going to protect their right to franchise. I mean, that doesn't sound like
Legal franchise, though. That's not, Mr. Allen said that he literally said, the moment we got it, our team worked into the night.
And
He did say that. So I
I'm
don't,
thankful for that.
I expect their team will continue. We have a great team and I think they take these laws very seriously, as has been proven time and time again. And they're both parties. This is not a party issue for our team. All right, anything else?
The other matter I wanted to raise, and again, it may be too close to election to do anything about it now, but I was asked about the video feeds for the drop boxes, whether they were live streamed somewhere or whether they could be live streamed somewhere, for folks that wanted to, take a look at it to make sure that there weren't anything improper going on. And I said, well, I know it's recorded. Like I said, it may be too close to this election to do anything about it, but I mean, my question was, is it possible to, connect those videos of the drop boxes? I mean, we have videos of all the various cameras at the power station or wharf office. Is it possible that we're able to have a page on the website that's got the videos live streamed from the drop boxes?
I understand Mr. Allen has looked into that request.
So my initial reaction to you was that, we have the capacity, and we actually created the capacity we didn't have in the past to capture a recording of all of these and keep them for a certain number of months after election day. And we do make those available upon request through the right to know, or not even right to know, but just upon request to the under the election code. It took extra effort to create a system where we could record these, because the Johnson Control system and the Cradle Point network, when I first arrived here, it captured videos, but only in like 2-hour clips per camera. And then you would have to go back and you would have to pay a fee to Johnson Controls to get those. So since then, we've worked out a way to video those and capture those on a series of screens at the Union Power Plant, as you described. So I asked after, and I'm a little leery of experimenting with something, or not testing something and trying to dive in and put it on the web and then have it explode on us and make it look like, the cameras are out, when in fact it's just a connection. And I'd also like to make sure that that's a secure hookup to the internet, and that it doesn't open us up to having the the connections to the cameras disrupted. So after giving you my initial response was, I'd rather not experiment with something like this during the election. I still asked Rob Wright to contact whoever he could at Johnson Controls, at the subcontractor who works at Johnson Controls, with the current camera vendor that we work with now. We have a system where, I'm able to view them on a laptop and even reboot them if Park Police calls and says, hey, it looks like the Eddystone camera's down, for example. This morning, I was able to reboot it from a laptop from remotely. But no one in our IT staff, including the head of the IT department, knows exactly how we would be able to take these cloud view videos and post them to the internet. It's not as simple as the videos that we have that we totally control, the camera system at the Union Power Plant, for example, in Chester, where it's actually enabled to go year round if we wanted to, and it's recording at all times. But we don't have the capacity, or at least no one knows how to do that just yet. So, this begs for, in my opinion, reducing the number of cameras, which I've argued for before, reducing the number of drop boxes rather, and by virtue of that, the cameras, and also getting a new system whereby we would have that capacity and it would be reliable. So, this system has proven to be kind of fragile, brittle, where we've had to shut down drop boxes because the camera malfunctioned. But, so far, knock on wood, all 39 are working right now. So Brookhaven had been a problem in the past. Upper Chi had been a problem in the past. Swarthmore had been a problem in the past. Marple had been a problem in the past. We were able to solve those during this most recent off season, making some changes. But it begs for, during the off season, changing this entire system so that we could do what you're being asked about.
Thank you. And obviously, like I said, it's not as easy as raising public. It's not as easy as flipping a switch. to do it now, but in the off season, maybe we can perhaps, I would support taking a look at, doing whatever, especially as you get into the presidential election next year. I think it provides for greater transparency if it can be done, so that folks can watch the drop boxes. Obviously, as we know, they're a source of complaints, in regards to election transparency. And I think the cameras do nothing but show that we don't have an issue or problem there. And the other problem I think it may go to solving is we've heard, although I don't know that we've had a specific problem here in Delaware County, but you have people that want to go and be at the drop boxes and witness and watch. And, that could lead to confrontations or some type of problem. Here, if people could just do it and watch it online, that would seemingly eliminate, that potential issue. So it's an idea that I would support if it's feasible and can be done. That's all I have.
All right. Mr. Alberts, anything? Mr. Parks? Mr. Allen, anything additional?
No, ma'am.
All right, Mr. McLean, I've asked, Mr. Allen to send out the tentative holds on our calendar for the upcoming meeting dates around the certification of the election. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.